Well, good morning, WellHouse Church. Pastor Cullen here, excited to be back storytelling through the book of Acts with you once again. You know, we have a really interesting story this morning that talks about teaching and correction and spiritual matters. And I thought it was a great opportunity to talk about one of the things that I think is most important in like a modern Christian space. And that's just the idea of divine curiosity. You know, at the end of this year, at the end of December, I'll be graduating from Baylor University, Truett Seminary at Baylor, and that'll be my second master's degree. And people are always really impressed when I tell them, you know, they ask me, did I go to college? Like, yeah, I have these degrees. People are always really impressed by having an undergraduate degree and multiple master's degrees. But, you know, if I can be honest, I've done a lot of work. I've been in school for a very long time trying to learn this, trying to get the best understanding of all of it. And the one thing that I notice time and time again is that the deeper I get into this, the more degrees I have, the less answers I have. I just really don't have very many answers anymore. Because when you really dig down and you really start to look and study, it just becomes evidently clear that there's significantly more than one right answer. Because we're asking the wrong question if we're looking for the right answer. There are some things that we can do and glean from this book, from this religion, from this faith that are very wrong. Very wrong. It's Christian nationalism is very wrong. America is not God's nation. America is one of the nations in which there are people of God that live. But the idea that America is this Christian nation and somehow supreme to other nations and American exceptionalism is wrong. That is dead wrong. But outside of a few things like that, there's really not one right answer. And I can show you that today in this text. If you remember last week, we ended up having a conversation about Priscilla and Aquilla. And Aquila is the man of this couple, Aquila and Priscilla. And we met them at the beginning of the chapter. And he is introduced first. Aquila is introduced first with his wife, Priscilla. Well, the second time they're listed, in verse 18, Priscilla gets listed first. Priscilla gets listed as the leading name, the recognizing name for the work of ministry. And so now we get to this section in chapter 18 where Priscilla and Aquila are going to do some actual ministry. They're going to do some actual work. And they end up meeting this guy named Apollos. Now, he's a Jew and he's from Ephesus. Or he's in Ephesus and he's from Alexandria. I don't have time to go through all those details right now, but if you would like to know more about those and the context around those, you can join me and Clayton for tomorrow's episode of A Closer Look, and we go through a few of those things. But the text says he's an eloquent man, well-spoken, well-educated. He's from Alexandria. He's a smooth talker. And the text says that Priscilla and Aquila hear him, and he's got this like real enthusiastic way of speaking about all of this. But the text says he just doesn't quite have it right. Specifically, the text says he only knew the baptism of John. Now, the real reason I need you to understand why this is so important is because that's talking about John the Baptist. He only knew the baptism of John. Well, if you read the Gospels, you know that John dies long before Jesus does. And so what Apollos knows some of the teachings of Jesus. Apollos knows some of the sacrifice, some of the suffering, some of the first will be last and last will be first. Apollos knows some of Jesus' teachings. And he knows the baptism of John. So what that tells me, a reader of this text, is that Apollos has no understanding of Jesus, the death and resurrection. He only knows the baptism of John, which happened long before any of that ever happened to Jesus. And so Apollos just doesn't know. Well, Priscilla and Aquilla, might I mind you, Priscilla, the woman, taking the lead here once again, they take him aside, and the text says they explain the way of God to him more accurately. Not necessarily correcting him, just filling in some gaps. Like, hey, bro, you really got this stuff on lock, but, maybe we could help you fill in a few of these pieces that you don't quite have yet. And you could call that correction, you could call it a lot of things, but the thing that I love about it is that as the text goes on to tell you what Apollos continues to go about teaching, and the piece that they fill in for him that makes him go and become this great orator, this great teacher, this great man who is this theological sage. This is what it says. For he powerfully refuted the Jews in public, showing by the scriptures that the Messiah is Jesus. Now we need to talk about this word Messiah for a minute. Messiah literally means the anointed one, the chosen one, the one who's been anointed, appointed for a purpose. And that word actually comes from the book of Isaiah. And then we get it repurposed in the New Testament, and it's most commonly translated as Christ, the Christ, which once again just means the anointed one. The Messiah being Jesus, the way I need you to think about this is what that means is that Apollos was going around, and Apollos had some teachings of Jesus. The ancient world doesn't have telephones, they don't have cell phones, they don't have the internet, they really don't even have books. Books are very expensive, hard to come by. Most people can't read. And so their entertainment, the things they did to pass the time, were listen to orators, listen to teachings. And so good orators would have memorized these teachings of these people. And so he's got some teaching of Jesus memorized, but when he comes out proclaiming Jesus as Messiah, what he's doing is he's proclaiming Jesus as the liberating King. And I think that's so interesting. WellHouse Church, here's the thing that I want you to know. There's a lot of things in this book. There's a lot of teachings in this book that there's not only one way to do it, there's not only one right answer, and there shouldn't only be one right answer. Because if we, as the people of God, genuinely believe that the Holy Spirit, the divinity within you, is at work, teaching you, guiding you, leading you, pushing you towards the path of divinity and wholeness for yourself, then we also need to believe that the Holy Spirit can do that without me or some other spiritual authority figure giving you the answer. The answers that you need to know, the answers that you need to be confident in, based on this text, are twofold. Number one, that there's equality in the liberating King. In the liberating message of Jesus, there's equality. It's not a man's world. Priscilla's the one leading this charge. That it's man, woman, slave, free, Greek, Jew. There's equality here. There's equal parts, equal status, equal office, equal opportunity in the liberating King, the message of Jesus. And the second part is, I think the thing that you need to take away is that Jesus is Messiah. If Jesus is not the chosen one, if Jesus is not the anointed one, if Jesus is not the liberating King, if that is not the view of Jesus you have, I would say And we might put you in the category that you only know the baptism of John. And that's okay. We all have pieces of this that we're trying to fill in. But the most important piece of this that we can walk away with is that Jesus is the liberating King. The liberating King, the one who's breaking bondage, breaking chains, breaking curses, breaking oppression, breaking all the experiences of sin and death that we find and experience in the world. The liberating King is breaking us free of those oppressions. And if that's not the view of Jesus you have, then that's the thing we need to work on. Because the experience of Jesus should not be oppressive. It should not be limiting. It should be liberating and empowering. So WellHouse Church, the question that I want to ask you today is, how do we as a people, the people of God, the people who know the way of the Lord, how do we be a better people who promote and push the message of Jesus as the liberating King for all?